Dear participants, a very good morning to one and all. I am Dr. S. Krishnaveni, coordinator of this FDP. Welcome you all to the second day sessions of the AICT Atal sponsored 5-day online faculty development program on advances in sensor technology, AST 2020. Today we are having Mr. G. Venkat Reddy sir, outstanding scientist, and Mr. K.C. Das, scientist F from RCI Research Center Imarat from DRDO Hyderabad. Uh, Welcome you sir. Now I request Mr. Venkatesh sir to give a brief introduction about the speakers to the participants. Thank you one and all.
Good morning, everyone. My name is S. Venkatesh, working as an assistant professor in the Department of ECE in Gayatri Vidya Parishad College for degree and PG courses. Today, I am very happy to introduce Sri G. Venkata Reddy Garu. He is working as a scientist head in Research Center IMRAT in a DRDO, which is located in Hyderabad. He completed his Bachelor of Engineering from Usmania University College of Engineering, Hyderabad, and he completed MTech from Indian Institute of Kharagpur. He is working in the field of development of hardware and software for avionics for unmanned and manned aircrafts and aerospace vehicles for more than 3 decades. He is outstanding scientist in uh, RCI, which is a research center IMRAT. I'm thanking you, sir, for accepting our invitation as a speaker in AICT Atal FTP. Now, I'm requesting Sri G. Venkat Reddy Garu uh, take over the mic and start his presentation.
Participants, please mute yourself.
Good morning, all the participants. Am I audible? I am clearly heard?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Sir, you are audible.
Oh, okay, thank you. So I'll be presenting about mainly the avionics, that is aviation electronics. It's a joining both aviation and electronics. Avionics, it's called. So basically, avionics originated from the aircraft electronics, but later now it is used even for missiles, satellites, space launch vehicles, and aircrafts also. So basically, avionics is an embedded system only with configured for the onboard systems of the aircrafts and missiles. So first, initially, I'll talk about importance of the technology, electronics technology in defense, and then I'll switch to avionics and embedded hardware and software. So later, Mr. K.C. Das, he is expert in navigation sensors and systems. So he'll be presenting about the navigation sensors and systems. So basically, any defense presently any military technology and defense is plays very important role than ever before in the history of the mankind. So whichever nation has got the technological superiority, they can only win the wars. It's not the human prowess or it's not the strength of the individual fighting capability. It is the strength of the technology that only makes the nations win the wars. So I'll give a glimpse of some of the defense systems. Of course, the defense systems are very, very large number of systems are there. So I'll give a glimpse of few of the subsystems which are useful for our missiles technology also. So these are some of the space-based radars, unmanned airship, and battlefield information network. These are all basically, they do the surveillance of the incoming threats of the enemy threats and launch the missiles to neutralize the enemy threats. So it's network-centric warfare that is the presently, and the future is going to be totally network-centric warfare. So that is C4ISR systems. That is control, command, communication, computers, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance systems. What it means basically is that there are various sensors in the space or airborne early warning and control systems, and ground radars, and various sensing mechanisms by which the enemy aircrafts or drones or missiles which are incoming, which are going to come to our airspace, they will be detected automatically using the command control systems, missiles will be launched to neutralize the incoming threats. So this totally technology driven only. It's basically having this complete like we should be able to detect the threats in real time and launch the missiles with minimal human intervention, almost negligible human intervention. So that is the technology that we are having now, and we have to have much more superior technology in coming future also. So these are basically, I'll just skip through these things because I'll come to the avionics and embedded systems fast. So the various radar systems are there, multifunction radars, which will basically be tracking the airspace for various signatures of the whatever maybe aircrafts and missiles or anything which are in the satellites which are there in the air. The air situation monitoring will be there, and will be able to identify, detect, and even discriminate, and then give the commands to the missile system to destroy the targets. And also whether the targets are destroyed or not, that assessment also is possible with these radars. So there are various challenges in the radar systems. Anyway, this my lecture is mostly about the avionics systems. Let's skip through this. So this is again airborne early warning and control system. It is basically Embraer aircraft will be having all the sensors on the aircraft, and it will be continuously based there in the air only. Actually, it's a flying aircraft 24/7 kind of thing. So which will be having all these sensors, and it will be doing the electronic surveillance and counters, different surveillance mechanisms, and it will have the radar warning receivers and missile approach warning system also. Any missiles are approaching to us, missile approach warning system is there, and countermeasure dispensing systems are there. So these are all, this is a great achievement of DRDO to have this kind of system. And this global navigation satellite system, this is actually what everybody is using nowadays GPS. But the global navigation system that is used for missiles have got different challenges where it should be completely jam. I'll come to that. It should work in high dynamics. It should have a higher update rate. It should have much better accuracy. And when it is launched from a canister, from the missile is launched from the canister, it should have the time to first fix should be very fast. So otherwise, normally when you switch on any GPS receiver, it will take a couple of seconds, many seconds, actually almost a minute or so. But here we should have the very fast time to fix, and anti-jamming, anti-spoofing capabilities, and better accuracies, and it should be a miniaturized system. These are the GNSS receiver related challenges. So, and yeah, the different satellite communication also is important. And DRDO is launching the satellites for military purposes also. So for gathering the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. And also IRNSS is launched by ISRO for good position and navigation accuracies. So then we should have good airborne data links. So data links are the one which precisely capture the information about the target, its position and its velocities, and will be transmitted to the intercepting missiles. Intercepting missiles, our own missiles, against the enemy's missiles or enemy's aircrafts. So these data links are also play a very important role. They will be, these data links are it's ground based, and airborne also are there data links, and aircrafts also will be having the data links, and satellites also will give them this data link information about the targets, and ships also, enemy ships, the information also will be given by the satellites. So these are, and unmanned air vehicles also will be carrying a lot of sensors for surveillance, monitoring, and even for future UAVs have got the even missile launching capabilities also. So these navigation systems, which like what Mr. K.C. Das will be presenting later, we ourselves are also developing the navigation sensors like ring laser gyro based, fiber optic gyro based, and MEMS based gyros we are making, and accelerometers also we are developing in-house in DRDO itself. So these are have got its own challenges. For example, in a ship, for if even the GPS denied environment for a day or two also, it should have the very less inaccuracy should be there. So it should not show the position after 1 day, not more than a kilometer or so. That much inaccuracy only is allowed. That kind of challenges are there in the navigation systems. And whenever GPS is available, it will be correcting its positions and other information. So, and these are the GNSS receiver design challenges, what I explained before. So we have IRNSS, GPS, GLONASS, fusion also is done in our systems, all fusion of these three systems with our own navigation sensors. And it should withstand all the high dynamics requirements. High dynamics is, it's more than 3000 meters per second or 4000 meters per second. That kind of velocities also it should accept, and high accelerations also. So in a high acceleration, you should not lose the fix. So these kind of challenges are there. So this calls for not a commercial kind of GNSS receiver, but this has got many other challenges with respect to GPS and GLONASS and IRNSS receivers. And other technologies that are important for the missiles, this is the RF seeker technology. RF seeker is the one, it is an airborne radar. Basically, it's will be in the nose of the missile. So when it is nearing the approaching the target, till it approaches the target, navigation system will be providing the navigation system and data links. Will be giving the information about the targets and also missiles' own positions. So based on that, it will be approaching towards the target. But once it comes nearer to the target, the seeker will be homing onto the target. The seeker is nothing but airborne onboard radar kind of thing, you can say, where it will be sending the echoes and it will be sending the RF pulses and getting the echoes. Based on that, it will get the range and range rate information and the angular information. So elevation and azimuth, how much it is in elevation and azimuth plane, how much it is away from the missile. Accordingly, missile will be homing onto the target. So these also very challenging technology, but we have now mastered this technology. So, and in this, basically transmitter, receiver, these are the important things, and the RF signal processing will be there. So with signal processing, it will be correcting its course towards the target, and it is a gimbal system. So missile might be not in the direction of the target, but the gimbal will be moving towards the target. And that will give the gimbal movement will give the how much angular variation is there with respect to missile to target. So accordingly, missile will be turning towards the target. And this is active electronically scanned array seeker, AESA seeker it's called, where it's not the gimbal movement, but it is the beam steering that will be done by the phase shifting of the using the phase shifters. So when you give the phase shift information to the transmitters, all of them together will be forming the beams in different directions. So here also a lot of signal processing technology will be there in this. So this is also now we have got the AESA based seekers almost developed and almost ready to be tested. And another seeker is the IR seeker, infrared and visible seeker basically. So it is based on optical based this is. So where we will be seeing the images of the target. It may be tanks, or it may be the enemy missiles, or it may be the ground targets. So it can be bunkers or airfields So by looking at those images, image processing will be done, and accordingly it will be seeking the targets. So this lot of image processing and pattern recognition kind of algorithms will be used in these imaging seekers. So this we have successfully developed for many applications against tanks and against enemy missile air defense systems. Its air defense systems is basically neutralizing of the enemy missiles. And as I told, there is data links also very important. Updating the target information, it may be from ground to missile or air to missile, or sometimes the radars will do the guidance also and give the final commands to the missile, like Akash missile and all. It's not onboard guidance that is done; it's the ground radar itself will be doing the guidance. It will be looking at both missile and target, and it will tell the missile which what is the guidance command that should be given to the missile to home towards the target. So, and some data links are there for video transmission to have the kill assessment, and also telemetry. Like during the development flight trials, we will telemeter all the information about the missiles, so that we can do the post-flight analysis, how successful the mission is, or whatever the problems that are encountered in the mission. For correction of the those failures, telemetry data will be used. So this is basically the RF data links. All of these are RF data links from air to ground, or ground to air, or air to air also. And once the missile approaches the target, then there will be a proximity fuse that will fire the warhead. That will actually detonate the warhead. So it will give the firing command to the warhead system, so that warhead will be detonated. So this will typically work up to 30 to 40 meters. So based on the seeker itself, it will be approaching the target. Once it nears the target, then radio proximity fuse will be activated. So that will be looking at how nearer it has come. So depending on the approach and the distance, it will detonate the warhead to destroy the target. So there is a radio-based, RF-based proximity is there. Even laser-based proximity also is there. So both of them are used. Either of them is used in different missile systems. So, and now so a lot of VLSI-based systems are being developed in-house also, where we want to make it miniaturized systems, and obsolescence also. In case we are denied any process systems, we have our own process system also. So for that, we have developed our own system on chip, PowerPC 440 based, PPC 440 it's called, PowerPC 440 processor based system on chip we made with a lot of I/O controllers for Ethernet, MIL standard 1553. This is the avionics bus that is used in the missiles and aircrafts. So I/O controllers for Ethernet, MIL standard 1553B, UART, that is RS422, and ARINC. ARINC is another avionics point-to-point link. So all these I/O controllers are incorporated in our system on chip, 65 nanometer. This is used in many our own missiles, many of the missiles. So the technology and challenges are complex IP core development and verification of the integrated RTL for 100% coverage, multiple clock domain crossing and synchronization. These are the challenges. And multi-million gate integration into a single chip and VLSI. This is okay. It's not very advanced and the latest technology, but this was done 10 years before, and at that time it was decently latest technology. And we have multiple, so where the SOC, along with transceivers, memories, and opto-isolators, we have made into a single module so that it becomes further compact. So with dies are integrated in the multi-chip module. So that is, and also for GNSS receiver also we have GQ by OM, GPS, GLONASS, and Gagan on a single module, GQ OM. That is also made as a MCM only. So all these dies are integrated, and this is also extensively used in different missiles. And we have embarked on the navigation on chip, where the MEMS, gyros, accelerometers, and SOC, and different sensors like pressure sensors, magnetometers, all of them are integrated into a single chip, and all this multiple sensors data fusion also is done on this chip itself. This work we have initiated. We have not yet completed this. And we have also introduced the machine learning in avionics systems, so using the NVIDIA's Jetson TX1, TX2, and Jetson Xavier. Recently, it is Xavier system on module is there. So using those modules, we have started developing the onboard systems, which can do the machine learning during the missions, particularly for the image processing and whatever images we are capturing. So for the classification and detection of the target, we are using the machine learning. And this is a slide which is nowhere related to our missiles, but generally tomorrow's battlefield is going to be totally technology driven. It will be tomorrow's soldiers will be robotic vehicles, robotic soldiers. So this is what the picturization of that, visualization of that. So that's what we say. Studies suggest that by early 2025, the presence of autonomous robots, networked and integrated on the battlefield might not be an exception, but in fact norm. So now throughout the world, robotic industry is gearing up for the defense applications for unmanned robotic system to assist the war effort. So then I'll come to this avionics embedded systems. This is the, as I told, avionics is aviation electronics. So there are various avionics systems that are on board the missile. As I explained just now, there is a seeker, there is a remote RF radio proximity fuse, there is an inertial navigation system, and onboard computer. Onboard computer is the one that is the heart of the missile, which does the control, guidance, and interfacing with the launch computer. So everything is done by onboard computer. That is the one which basically initiates the launching of the missile. And target update receiver is a data link which updates the target information. And radio altimeter is the one which gives the altitude information using the RF echoes. So various onboard systems are there, which are avionics systems. So basically, what is an embedded system? Embedded system is the one, a computer system that is embedded in a larger system. Like as I told, what is the process system that is there in the RF seeker or IAR seeker, imaging seeker, or navigation system. They are all basically embedded systems. And examples of the subsystems, once again, I'll explain. Inertial navigation system one, which provides the position, velocity, and orientation of the missile will be provided by the inertial navigation system. Onboard computer is the one which is the heart of the missile, which actually interacts with the launch computer. Launch computer will interact with the onboard computer to get the complete health of the missile before launching the missile. Then it will give commands to the onboard computer to initiate all the other subsystems and prepare the missile. Commands will be given by launch computer to the onboard computer. Onboard computer, basically onboard computer interface with all the subsystems in the missile. And that information will be, that health of those all systems will be given to the launch computer. And launch computer initiates the onboard computer to do the pre-launch, that is before launch, and auto launch, automatic launch operations and all will be given by, commands will be given by launch computer. And missile interface unit, that is the one that interfaces with the actuators, pyros and relays, different relays and all that will be operated, and all the status information will be acquired by a missile interface unit. And control system is the one that controls the fins of the actuator, fins of the missile. Basically, with the control system only, we will be able to turn the missile and orient towards the whatever desired guidance path. And telemetry is the one which provides, which transmits the flight information to the ground, and seeker is the one that forms onto the target. So these are the major subsystems in a missile. So the inertial navigation, as I told, it gives the position, velocity, and orientation of the object with respect to a reference frame. So what is important in inertial navigation system is, first you should initialize with the accurate position information, latitude, longitude, and altitude. Then if it is a moving system, like if it is launched from the aircraft, you should initialize the velocity information also. So from aircraft, velocity should be transferred to the missile in the proper reference frame. And initial orientation also should be initialized. Thereafter, gyros and accelerometers, they will be sensing the rates and accelerations. So if you integrate the acceleration, you will get the velocity. If you integrate the velocity, you will get the position. So every time previous position to current position, if you add, you will get the current position. So that's how the computation will be done inside the navigation processor. Similarly, angles also, once you integrate the body rates, then you will get the body angles. And you have to resolve all these accelerations along the current orientation, basically. So basically, the orientation is represented by Euler angles or direction cosine matrix or quaternions. So direction cosine matrix is the one which we have studied probably in our 10+2, where the transformation matrix is there. Whenever you do the transformation by angle, so you will cos theta minus sin theta, cos theta, some matrix will be multiplied. That kind of matrix is a three-dimensional direction cosine matrix. So basically, you will be propagating the velocity to get the positions, and propagating the quaternions to get the orientation. So essentially, the inertial navigation scheme is, as I explained just before. So inertial sensors, that gyros and accelerometers, every 2.5 milliseconds, so it will be sensing the incremental angles and incremental velocities. Basically, rates multiplied by 2.5 milliseconds will get the incremental angle. Again, acceleration multiplied by 2.5 milliseconds will get the incremental velocities. So, and we have to model the sensors, the biases, errors, and scale factor errors have to be compensated. With that, we will get the delta theta, delta v, that is the incremental angle and incremental velocity. So, we using those incremental angle and incremental velocities, so we accumulate the previous angle to current, previous angle plus current angle, current incremental angle will give the present angle. And whatever incremental velocity is there, that should be resolved along the current attitude. So using the DCM. So once we resolve and add to the velocity, you will get the latest velocity. And that velocity, if you latest incremental, velocity update, and that velocity multiplied by again 2.5 milliseconds or 20 milliseconds, if you multiply, you will get the positional increment that should be added to the previous position. You will get the position. So this is in a very simple way I am explaining, but okay, there is lot many other things are there where you have to account for the earth rate, you have to account for many other things, you have to account for some Schuller oscillations. So many other things are there. And also it is fused with the GPS data, so that sensor fusion will be done to correct whatever errors that are getting accumulated in the inertial navigation system, bias errors and other errors. So they will be corrected by with accurate GPS information. So that is a carbon filter is used for that. So yeah, as explained before, the gyros and accelerometers. Gyros normally, most of the gyros they will be giving the, we have the RS422 link, the serial link. With that we get the information. And if we are using the accelerometers, some of the RLG systems have got inbuilt accelerometers, but some of the systems what we are developing, we have our own accelerometer separate and gyro separate. So then from accelerometers we are getting the analog signals. So we do the ADC conversion and RS422 data from the gyros we take, and we do the navigation processing. For this we are using analog devices, DSP processor 21060 kind of processor, or PowerPC 5200 kind of processor is being used. And as I told, the GNSS receiver will be providing the accurate positional information. So that will be fused with our pure navigation, and we will be correcting the navigation sensors characteristics as well as the position and velocities. The attitude also, quaternions also will be corrected. So instead of having a separate embedded system for navigation alone, now we are going for integrated navigation, onboard computer navigation system, and missile interface units. So that it is becoming more and more compact for the latest tactical missiles. So some of the process which we are using, I am just explaining. So in for some of the missiles, some set of the missiles, we are using I.MX6 processor, which is having two ARM cores. Two cores are there, two ARM cores. So one of them is doing onboard computer processing, another one is doing the navigation processing, and with shared memory they will be communicating with each other. And it has got many interfaces in the I.MX itself, Ethernet and some serial interfaces. Additionally, we are putting a Spartan FPGA where Spartan 6 FPGA this is, where we are putting the MIL standard 1553B IP core. This, as I told, this is avionics bus. So wherein OBC can communicate with all the other subsystems as a bus controller. It's a multiplexed bus basically. 1553 is a multiplexed bus. So this will initiate the communication and either send the data to different subsystems or get the data from different subsystems as a master. That is the 1553B communication bus protocol. And various analog and discrete digital IOs are there. And serial port IP core and UART is RS422 IP core also is there in the Spartan FPGA. So this is extensively used, and this is very low cost processor. It hardly costs maybe 1,000 or 2,000 kind of thing. So, and another kind of design we are having is a dual redundant INS OBC configuration. Here, for long range missiles, we want to introduce the redundancy. So here we have two inertial measuring systems, inertial sensors. One is ring laser gyro based RNAV, and another is MEMS based. MEMS is very low cost sensor. Actually, what we are using our cell phones also is MEMS based systems only. But okay, these are high accurate MEMS gyros, robust MEMS gyros that are used in the missile. So, and we have two processor based systems, two independent processors with separate power inputs. So that if any one of the system in any path fails, other one will carry out the mission. That is the idea. With redundancy, it is provided. So this INS OBC processor card is based on the Zinc processor. So Zinc is Xilinx based all programmable system on chip. So this is configurable all programmable system on chip, where you have in the same chip we have processing system and programmable logic. Processing system is having two two ARM Cortex-9 processors are there, two cores are there. As I told earlier, like in I.MX6, here also with two ARM cores, so one of them will be doing OBC processing, another will be doing the navigation system processing. And these processor cores are again having the FPUs also. FPUs. And it has got a lot of peripherals, UART, CAN bus, and I2Cs, SPI, and 4 into 32-bit GPIOs also are there. So, and lot of peripheral support with gigabit Ethernet support also, USB and gigabit Ethernet also is there. And additionally, in the programmable logic, we have added our own IP cores for 1553B and avionics full duplex switched Ethernet. There is a reliable Ethernet IP core is there, that also we added. And ARINC IP core also, that ARINC also avionics related point-to-point link protocol also is added this. So, and extra UART, some 5-6 UARTs also added into this programmable logic. So you can add any other signal processing logic also we can add in this. So that is the beauty of the Zinc processor. In the same chip, you can add lot of IP cores, and also it will have many processing systems. Processor cores also will be available in this. So this is extensively used in our avionics systems. So this is, as I said, dual redundant. So 2 such processor boards are there. So if any one of them fails, other will carry out the mission. And we now, so a lot of computational requirements are coming, but missiles are becoming more and more compact. Basically, in that they want to add more payload, less of this electronics. So they want our electronics to be as compact as possible, not to take up the weight and volume of the missile. So this is very compact avionics module, which is having very high computational power. This is the TMS-3206678 octa-core processor, DSP processor. This is Texas DSP processor. And we have, as I told, that Zinc, just now I explained the Zinc, which is having 2 ARM cores and a very big FPGA also is there. Additionally, Kintex is a completely different FPGA. So all these processing systems we are putting into a single system which can do the job of onboard computer, navigation system, telemetry system, and data link systems, two-way data link, and IAR seeker, that is imaging radar, imaging seeker. So, and DSP for all these processing systems also, DSP is done inside this itself in the FPGA as well as in the processor. So this is quite a complex electronic system, but now these are all achievable. So just now I explained the Zinc processor is extensively used, which is having processing system as well as programming logic. So now actually Zinc UltraScale has come with 4 ARM Cortex A53 with floating point unit. This is much higher powerful than Cortex A9, and also it has got dual ARM Cortex R5 for real-time processing unit, and it has got GPUs also, and lot of security features and DDR controllers, gigabit Ethernet CAN, I2C, UART, USB, SPI, NAND and NOR flash connectivity also is there, USB, SATA, and PCI Express. So this is all powerful Zinc UltraScale. You can configure for any application. You will be using only, you will not be requiring all the features, but you can disable whatever you don't want and you can use whatever you need only. We can use it, and it has got a very big programming logic FPGA portion also. So wherein you can add your own video codecs and high-speed connectivity, 100 gigabit Ethernet also, we can add PCI Express Gen 4 also. So this is a beautiful system that is being already planning to use, started using it. And another Zinc UltraScale plus RF socket. This has got inbuilt 6 giga samples per second, 6 giga samples per second ADC is there. Very high speed ADC. And DAC also of the same order. So with this, our RF seeker technology becomes more and more compact, and development also will be better with this kind of RF socket. These are used for multiple applications like SDRs, software-defined radios, and many other applications also it is being used. So this is the very latest one. So this is about the embedded hardware which I have presented till now. And I'm talking about the software. So whatever hardware you make, finally it is software that implements the functionality most of the times. So most of the functionality is implemented in the software implements the functionality. So it can be OS based or it can be without OS, bare metal. So what are the different features of embedded software is it is usually operates as a part of the bigger system, must operate in real time, in synchronization with other subsystems. Failure affects the operation of other systems as well. So that's why you need proper redundancy mechanisms if the failure is likely to be there. Usually supports a dedicated function delivered by different applications. It's not a general purpose one, embedded software generally. So operates with limited resources because it will be constrained environment it has to operate, so you will have less memory and CPU capability, but still you have to, it has to meet the functional requirements. So it may or may not contain the operating system, and it is in the cost compiled development environment. Its development environment will not be embedded in the embedded system. It is actually in a PC or some other desktop will be having the development environment, and you have to flash the application program onto the embedded system, only remotely debugged. And minimum memory footprint is there, and then almost no user interface. Users are others normally. So development process of embedded software, you have the IDE having the compilers, assemblers, and the linkers, locators, build, and all that. With IDEs, it will be there. Like Vivado also is having the IDE, embedded software development IDE for Xilinx based processors. So similarly, there are various for different processor families. So the overall picture of the embedded software is normally with OS, a startup task will initiate multiple tasks. It should not be too many tasks, by the way. It should be as minimum as possible. And different tasks will be communicating, synchronizing with the semaphores and communicating through message queues. And various IOs will initiate the interrupts. In the ISRs, the data will be, some activity will be done, which has to be done exactly at that real-time instant. So that will be done in the interrupt handlers, and that data will be again provided through message queues to the tasks. So typical embedded software real-time executive, the simple executive will be a single task based. Basically, no task. It is a bare metal based. Is the most ideal real-time executive, where every minor cycle, it will be basically decomposed into time-wise. One major cycle of say 20 milliseconds or 40 milliseconds will be again spread across minor cycles of 5 milliseconds or 10 milliseconds kind of thing. So each minor cycle we will be doing some tasks, some jobs basically. So for example, most of the times in the embedded system, you have to read data from sensors, do some processing and finally give commands to some actuators or some relays or some pyros or something like that for a missile kind of application. Or for that matter, any general purpose embedded system also, you have to get some data from some sensors, do some processing and give commands to something to actuate something. So that's how it will be there. So and with some periodicity, we'll have to get the sensor data. It's not that you get sensor data very randomly. So periodically, we'll be monitoring we'll be sampling the sensors and do some control, do some processing, control processing or guidance processing, and finally do actuate the actuators in this case. So real-time clock interrupt, suppose every 5 milliseconds you want to do the processing. So real-time clock is configured for the 5 milliseconds. So you will get an interrupt every 5 milliseconds. So every 5 milliseconds in the interrupts you will be activating the task. You will make some task active. So that task will perform the application activities, and wait for the again next interrupter. So it's something like that. It will happen. So as I told, embedded systems software can be with real-time operating systems or without OS at all. So real-time operating that are typically used is VxWorks, RT Linux. So and some microkernels also used like MicroCOS, and recently of late FreeRTOS is available for almost all the processes. That is now it's extensively used. So that's how it is. And any IO activity, suppose any sensor data that is coming, it will come to the receive ISR, interrupt service routine. In the receive ISR, that data will be written into a circular buffer, and this task will be reading the data from the circular buffer and processing it and decoding and process the data and do the computations, or ask for some other task to use the data and do the computations. And through message queues, this data will be transferred between the tasks. And finally, you have to send to some other system this process data. Then you write into the some buffer, double buffer, which a transmit ISR will periodically read from the double buffer and transmit to the other system. So basically, the essence of this slide is we have to use circular buffers and double buffers. Then directly reading, then because it becomes asynchronous operation and you will lose the data integrity. So real-time OS scheduler will be like there are each task will be accorded some priorities: high priority, low priority, different priorities, and it is preemptive, priority-driven preemptive scheduler. So one has to be very careful when they are configuring the tasks. So some low priority, high priority task should not be waiting for data from the low priority, where low priority task is not getting the opportunity to execute itself when some middle priority task is grabbing the processor. So such priority inversion problems occur, and that leads to the totally, hanging situation. So when configuring the different tasks, one has to be very careful in giving the priorities and the dependence between the tasks. So for onboard computer software, which I've been doing for last many decades, so basically it consists of the requirements analysis, design and implementation, then testing, and finally system level integration. And after that, periodically maintenance changes that occurring in the requirements and bugs fixing and all that. So these are all iterative and incremental also, and it is a circular also. It is it goes every time, it can go up and down, and verification validation will be done at every phase. So this is very systematic, disciplined software engineering discipline has to be adopted. So different layers, it can be configured as different layers. So this is very low level hardware and system software, then real-time executive, then actual application software, and fault tolerance is the topmost layer. So I'll skip, otherwise I think Mr. Kesidas has to present another at least minimum half an hour. So I will rush through about the software related things which are very specific to the onboard computer, where as I said, launch computer will be talking to the onboard computer to get the health of the missile, and once the missile is ready for launching, then it will initiate the auto launch sequence. Then OBC will initiate the launching sequence and fire the boosters for getting the liftoff. After liftoff, guidance will be guiding the missile towards the target positions. Then control will be controlling the missile so that it doesn't become unstable. And basically control giving the actuator commands to keep it stable. And various fault tolerance features are incorporated in the onboard computers, where if it by chance if it gets a reset, unknown, deliberate, inadvertent, and by chance if it gets reset, still mission should continue. So all state vector information is written into non-volatile RAM. And if any reset occurs, we will again read from the non-volatile RAM and proceed with the mission as if there is no break in the mission. So that's how it is. So, and also, as I told before, there are two processor-based system, two process and two navigation sensor-based system is there, which will have the redundancy. Even any one of them fails, other one will be continuing with the mission. And for launch, for light combat aircraft, this which I worked for almost 8 years in for light combat aircraft, LCAS flight control system. So there it is 4 sets of identical computers. Actually, it is a quadruplex system. So this has to have very high reliability because it is carrying the man in loop. So pilot, at any cost, pilot is the most important thing in the LCA. Even you can lose the aircraft, but you should not lose the pilot. That's how it is. So that's why it should be very highly reliable system. So their 4 computers will be running concurrently, maintaining the synchronization of 100 microseconds. And each computer acquires from 4 sets of sensors and shares the input data with other 3 computers using high-speed cross-channel data linker. And there is redundancy management module will be there, which will do the fault detection, fault isolation, and majority voting on the valid sets of the data. So as I told, there are 4 sets of sensors are there everywhere. So from all 4 sets, each computer will be getting 4 sets of data, and it will be doing the voting. So that is mean of the medians it will take, average of the medians, middle to average it will take. And if any one of them fails, middle one it will take. So control module processes the sensitive data and pilot inputs to generate the actuator commands. Actuator also again quadruplex. So only if any one of the actuator fails, still other actuators will continue to maintain the aircraft's control. So, and health of the system is continuously monitored by continuous built-in test. So future trends in avionics, which we are using extensively, we are using the deep learning paradigm and machine learning algorithms. So it's a deep learning, a set of algorithms in the machine learning that attempts to learn in multiple levels of features corresponding to different levels of abstraction. That is the initial layers, it will be low level features it will be getting. As in we go towards the higher layers, we will keep on getting the middle level features, high level features. Like it will be functioning in something like a human being, it will be doing the classification as humans do. So that's how the deep learning paradigm is there. So this actually deep learning is improving day by day. This is up to 2016, 2015 only it is there where we were getting more than 90%. But now I think about 99% we are getting the accuracy with the deep learning. So we have made a system for multi-sensor navigation where different vision sensors are used and navigation sensors are used, and doing the fusion of these vision sensors and navigation sensors. So we will be correcting our based on the pre-defined images of the targets, known images of the target area. So we will be correct what we are looking at from the vision sensors. We will be correcting our navigation information. So for this we have used Jetson TX2 module, NVIDIA's Jetson TX2 module, and latest it is Jetson Xavier module also has come. This NVIDIA's using the deep learning paradigm we developed this system. So basically inference is the one that is done on board. Training is done in the ground itself using the very highly computation intensive servers. So this whatever I mentioned here is the onboard the missile. So this is the TX2 module, but presently we have shifted to Jetson Xavier module. So this we are calling it as deep inference computing engine. It's GPU based. So it has got 2 teraflop performance. So such a powerful computational power it has got using the GPUs. With GPUs concurrency is achieved at very low level. And also we have embarked on model-based auto code generation for avionics, where models are using the model automatically code is generated, something like Simulink. It does similar to that, but for our avionics requirements, it is done. So customized for avionics. Simulink customized for avionics, we can say. So these are the, so that the testing, verification, validation time is reduced. So and total development cycle time is reduced. This highly software intensive project. So thank you, and I think K.C. Das can proceed with the navigation sensors and systems related presentation. Hello, Madam Krishnaveni, Madam. Was it audible, Madam? It was okay. It was...
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for accepting our invitation.
Okay.
You have highlighted the participants about the avionics systems and embedded systems, hardware and software, and created interest among the participants to focus more on this, sir. Thank you, sir. Now I request Mr. Venkatesh to introduce K.C. Das to participants. Over to Venkatesh.
I am happy to introduce Sri K.C. Das Garu, a scientist at RCI DRDO. He did his BTech from NIT Roorkela, MTech from Defense Institute of Advanced Technology, Pune. He worked in the area of interior navigation sensors. From 1999 to 2010, developed ring laser gyroscope and successfully used in long-range ballistic missiles. From 2010 to 2015, developed precision force accelerometer for long duration navigation applications like naval ships and submarines. Presently, developing state-of-art hemispherical resonator gyro for space navigation systems for defense applications. Thank you very much, sir, for accepting our invitation to become a speaker of our Atal FDP. I request Sri K.C. Das Garu start his presentation.
Thank you, sir. Sir, you can start your presentation.
I'll just enable. My slides are not visible. My slides visible, ma'am?
No, sir.
I'll just open it.
Now showing, sir.
Now visible, yeah.
Yes, sir, your screen is visible to us.
Okay. So I'll be mainly discussing about the navigation sensors and the systems.
No, K.C. Das, you can make it full actually. Can you make it?
Yes, yes.
Slideshow you can make.
Yes, yes.
Is
Is it okay?
Say ఒకటే మీరు తీసే
I'm audible, ma'am?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Then I'll start now. I'll talk about the sensors for navigation systems. So in this presentation, I'll be completing mainly the different type of gyroscopes like dynamically tuned gyroscope, ring laser gyros, fiber optic gyros, hemispherical resonator gyros, then advanced gyros like atomic interferometric gyros, for NMR gyroscope, non-nuclear magnetic resonant gyroscope, then MEMS gyros, then accelerometers, different type of accelerometers like force feedback accelerometers, MEMS accelerometers, then optical accelerometer, then magnetometers were used, then biosensors and pressure sensors. Any missile systems or any aircrafts or any vehicles nowadays, even cars, buses, they will have all some kind of sensors to aid the driver to reach its target or goal successfully with minor hiccups. So those sensors, they play vital roles in the navigation systems. So for navigation system, the sensors started major advance during the Second World War. During Second World War, both the parties, they were looking for a quick delivery of weapons to the enemy location without much human interference. For that, they wanted autonomous navigation systems. So fast navigation systems during World War II was used in the V2 rockets by Nazi, where they used the integrating accelerometer, MMIA, Muller Mechanical Integrating Accelerometer. This is PIGA, pendulous integrating gyro and accelerometer, single sensor having both gyros and accelerometers. For launching the missile V2 and ensuring that the rocket V2 reaches its target within an error of 100 meters at that time. That was the first historical application of the sensors for navigation systems. So that time onwards, these sensors have been used. But prior to that, they were using in the 1800th century and 1900th century the stars for navigation purpose in the ship, which is star tracking systems, which we are using now as the GPS, using artificial satellites. But at that time, the stars were used for navigation purpose also. But I'll be limiting to the only sensors what are used for navigation system, inertial navigation system. To start with, what is navigation? Navigation is the process of determining a vehicle's course by geometry, astronomy, radio signals, or any other means. And once we determine the course, then we can ensure that the vehicle reaches its target successfully. So this is often described by PVA, position, velocity, and attitude. Attitude is the angle in which the position and velocities are oriented. This can be accomplished by position fixing, that is the initial positioning, followed by the dead reckoning process, which is an inertial navigation system. Otherwise, you will have the GPS, which is not a dead reckoning system. The global positioning systems using the satellites. Position fixing we do directly by measuring the location, initial location. We used autonomous system, otherwise pre-surveyed location of the system, which will give the navigation, the initial coordinates for the initial coordinates for the integrating process. Navigation, inertial navigation per se is a integrating process. For that, we have to have the initial coordinates, so that during navigation, during integration process, we will have the positions correctly. final position correctly. This is the date reckoning system. This needs the initial locations to be fixed properly so that we can keep on integrating the sensor outputs, both gyro and accelerometer outputs, to get the present location. And further future integrations can be carried out to get the future locations till it reaches the target. Now, integration is such a process which will integrate not only the information but also the errors. So, to have the minimum errors in the final information, we should have the minimum error during integration process. I want to say that the errors of the sensors. So, this demands that the sensors what we use in the navigation system, and as the navigation process is an integrating process, the sensors should have the minimum errors. So for that, all the research and developments are there till now going on to have a sensors with minimum errors. Not only the errors should be minimum, but the sensors should be also reliable. It should not fail during the navigation system. So the minimum errors and the reliability of the sensors, they demand which type of sensors to be used for which applications. Of course, cost is another factor. But when we talk about a human being, human's life involved, like fighter aircrafts, or the type of missiles we use for long range systems, the reliability comes into picture. Now, coming to the navigation system, we have the two types of navigation system, which is platform navigation system and top-down navigation system. Initially, the platform navigation system was used where we have to integrate the accelerometer output to get the position. And because the navigation is done in a spherical surface, which is not, which is Earth surface, that is a spherical surface, there is always the X, Y, Z 3 accelerometers will be always getting tilted in some axis. Because it is not a planar surface, it is a spherical surface, the surface of Earth. For that, we have to not only integrate the accelerometer output, we have to also integrate in that direction, in which direction it is getting pointed at that time. To get the direction or attitude, we have the gyros which measure the accelerometer, direction of the accelerometer. And then that is used in the control loop to maintain the platform in its initial oriented axis of XYZ. So that is the platform navigation system where the whatever may be the surface in which it is traveling, the spherical surface, but the platform is oriented always in the initial XYZ axis. What is initialized that XYZ axis? Always it is the sensors are integrated in that missile, that vehicle axis, XYZ axis, and then integration is done always in the vehicle axis. Now, this demands the sensors to have high accuracy so that whatever errors are there, that should not be pointed out during these control applications. For that purpose, the gyros, they need not have a high dynamic range because as soon as we tilt more than 1 degree, the corrections are always applied. The gyro range is not very critical, only plus or minus 2 degrees per second the gyro range can be applied. But the sensors should be accurate, highly accurate. The drifts, errors should not be there. And at that time, the mechanization is very complicated also. Always controlling the platform, XYZ platform, it is not so reliable because of the mechanical bearings involved to always orient it back into the reference platform axis. So the probability of failure of the navigation system is very huge here because both X, Y, Z axis bearings to maintain the reference axis, they should be reliable, they should have minimum friction, and the gyros also at that time were mechanical gyros where the criticalities of those gyros were also very huge. So platform gyros, being not a reliable system, was later discarded for the top-down inertial navigation system. Here, the complexity of the maintaining the platform's system mechanically in its reference axis is implemented in the computer now. Now we don't have the platform XYZ having a bearing, but that platform is simulated in the software, and the software now takes the XYZ gyro outputs and maintains in the mathematical domain the platforms, the accelerometer axis, reference axis in the software platform. Now this system reduces the mechanical complexity to almost 0, but we increase the computational complexity. Now we have got advanced computational systems, embedded systems, and embedded hardware where this is done easily. So starting onwards, 1975 onwards, this top-down navigation system is the preferred navigation systems for missiles and aircrafts. So to mechanization of this top-down system is how it is done. XYZ gyros and XYZ accelerometers outputs are taken, and the accelerometer axis is the coordinates of XYZ accelerometer axis is maintained by taking the XYZ gyro rates in the navigation computer, and we get the accurate position information from the navigation computer. So from vehicle axis, it is converted into fixed axis, reference axis, or we tell it the body axis, inertial axis, where we do the computational calculations of the navigation. Navigation is always done in the inertial axis, so that the data is given finally to the for the control purpose as well as the where it is reaching the target. Now coming to the sensors in missiles, mainly we used this kind of sensors: gyroscopes, accelerometers, GPS. Though that is not sensor, but this is also used. Then we use the star tracker for the navigation purpose, and aided navigation systems now they use the magnetometers, pressure sensors, because the navigation, inertial navigation, they in the vertical axis it is always grows. The error is grows due to the presence of gravity. So for that we use the pressure sensor for correction purpose. Then magnetometers are used to aid the gyro output. These are the different applications I will be skipping, because more or less all the systems we will have the sensors for defense. Now any sensors that has to work based on some principles. We tell as a Newton's laws of inertia. Newton's law of inertia, Sagna effect, Coriolis principle, then atomic interferometric principle, Faraday effect, magnetoresistive effect. Some kind of physical principle is used in the sensor, because sensor converts some physical information into electrical signal. So this kind of principles we have to use in any kind of sensors. Inertial Newton's laws are used in the mechanical sensor. That is the spin axis, input axis, and so on. Now, this is the mechanical gyro principle, where the spinning axis maintains its reference based on the platform rotation. So, the DTG tells that at a particular spinning speed, the flexor of the rotation becomes so flexible that whatever the missile or vehicle moves, but the reference, the spinning axis is always oriented towards the reference axis at a tuned speed. So by measuring the orientation of the bearings, we can always measure the direction or rotation of the vehicle. So this is now used for the last 30 years, and the designs have been so mature that we have got a highly reliable gyros in this field, but it is a complicated gyro, having more than 150 mechanical components, highly precise components. So to make the systems more advanced, there was optical gyroscope that is based on the Sagnac effect. So Sagnac effect tells that two counter-propagating sensors will undergo the phase difference between themselves based on the rotation, and the phase difference is proportional to the rotation speed. So here we have two counter-propagating beams traveling, and in fact this was detected itself in the 1913. But the gyro principle usage of the Sagnac effect only came when the lasers were successfully discovered in 1963. So once the lasers were discovered, then this Sagnac effect was used as a gyroscopic principle. First by Sperry Gyroscope Company, which was making the mechanical gyros at that time, but they developed the first laser gyros where a 1 meter by 1 meter area was used, and there the measurement of the rotation of the platform was demonstrated using a helium neon laser having 1.15 micron. Nowadays they use the 632.8 visible lasers in all the gyroscopes. So Sagnac effect tells that the two counter-propagating beams will have a path length based on the rotation, and then we will have the time difference between the two propagating beams, which is proportional to omega, that is the rotation of the platform, and the optical path difference leads to the phase difference between the two beams. And this phase difference in turn is converted into frequency difference if the channel is a resonating channel, which is a laser gyro resonating channel. So there we measure the rotation by measuring the frequency. By measuring the phase, we measure the rotation in the fiber optics gyroscopes, where it is just an interferometer. The laser gyro is a active resonating medium, where the frequencies the frequency between the clockwise and counterclockwise beams will undergo a phase difference. While laser gyro, the advantages are accuracy. Now we have the most accurate gyros available in the laser using the laser gyroscope principle. Dynamic range up to 800 degrees per second available. 400 degrees per second, more or less, it is reliable and highly linear. Then startup time is less than 30 seconds, and reliability as such is 30,000 hours. Mainly depends upon the reliability of the laser mediums or laser prisms or mirrors what we use. Mirrors, they undergo some kind of coating removal process during continuous bombardment. That only limits the life of the gyroscope. And because it is the number of components are less, not around 30 to 40, so maintenance is also less for the gyros. Major advantage is that we don't have to calibrate the gyro like we calibrate the mechanical gyros. Mechanical gyros, the bearings, they are age. So we have to every 6 months or 1 year, we have to do the calibration of sensors. That is not required in the laser gyros or fiber optic gyros. These are the gyros made, and this is the navigation system. As you see, the laser will be traveling in the medium, that is the optical block. Here the gyro material is very important. We use a glass which is very less, minimum expansion coefficient of the glass will be there. We tell it as a zero or expansion coefficient of the glass is of the 10⁻⁶ type of thing. This is very critical because we are measuring the path length difference between the two propagating beams, and the path length should not be changing due to temperature, because path length will change if the glass geometry is changed. So by the design itself, we have selected the material so that it has got a minimum change, almost negligible change of its coefficients. These are the parameters of gyros, and as you see, the gyro becomes more and more sensitive if the L is more and more, path length is more and more. So if we are having a drift of 0.01 degree per hour for this 20 centimeter gyro, to get better drift, we have to increase the dimensions of the optical block, optical resonator. So for a 0.005 degree per hour, a gyro of 45 centimeter is being used. Similarly, but more and more accuracy demands for the laser gyros or fiber optic gyros bigger dimensions of the optical block. So this is a negative point for the laser gyros because accuracy depends upon the size of the gyroscopes. Now this is what I was telling, a submarine gyro which will have a 0.306 degree per hour will need a 60 centimeter gyro, and submarine INS is quite big also for that purpose. The configuration is that we will have the 4 prisms in the 4 corners, and then the beam travels, and then we measure by using these black and white fringes are being measured by the optical photodetector, and this output is used for the gyroscope. RLGs come in different configurations like a square cavity, triangle cavity. So there is a comparison between the square geometry and triangle geometry. Square cavity gives the better scale factor because area is more for the square geometry. Then TRP based resonators, they give better life period. Then the laser can be maintained either RF discharge or DC discharge. RF discharge only requires 15 volt but 250 megahertz bandwidth. The DC discharge again requires a 250 volt high voltage but DC signal. Based on based on different applications, different people use different discharge mechanisms, RF or DC. We have used RF, but now also the new designs we are going for DC due to the RF discharge will interfere other systems in the missiles, so they don't prefer the RF now. Though proper shielding can be used to reduce some kind of effect of these gyros on other wave systems. Similarly, say dithers are there to overcome nonlinearity, whatever small amount of nonlinearity will be there due to the lock-in effect. Then whatever we give the dither, that we remove by the software means. So I will just keep these errors of the gyros. I'll talk about the fiber optic gyros. In place of laser gyros, we had an optical block which was used as a resonating medium. But nowadays optical fibers are being used. So here we use 500 meters of fiber around a loop, and then the signal is flown between them, and both clockwise and counter propagating beams, they get interfered just like the RLGs, and the phase difference is measured by a photodetector. Hello. Yes, sir. Sure, sir. I'll be completing. So these are the fiber optic gyros also being used. This advantage of this gyro is that only by putting the fibers we can have a better accuracy gyroscopes. But other issues are there that the fibers are sensitive much more to the temperature and vibration, and they affect the performance. This is an alternative to RLG. This technology is now emerging to a high accuracy sensors. This is the fundamental principle of the fiber optic gyro, and because here no mirrors are there, then the mirror coating getting lost is not there. So we'll have a higher life period of the gyro, and the cost is the lower because only though we use the fibers, not very costly prisms or mirrors. Making mirror is very costly affair because of the layers of coating we do, whereas here only fiber is there and which is being wound. Then hemispherical resonator gyro is an advanced field of gyroscopes which are now being under development stage. Some 2-3 manufacturers, they are now available in the market also from their side. This effect is basically again the Coriolis effect. This was, but the Coriolis effect applying to the gyroscopic measurements, rate measurement, was discovered by Dr. Bragg, a French scientist, and he discovered that while he introduced a vibration to the a glass structure. The beats they underwent a precision, or the beat frequencies changed based on the rotation, that audible beat frequencies. And when discovered, when he properly investigated, he boiled down to the mass of that periphery, that rim mass undergoing precision due to the Coriolis acceleration. In fact, this is the principle which is used both for HRGs as well as MEMS gyros also. So we in the HRG or MEMS will have the different a standing wave we have to form in the rim, and the standing wave will have the 4 nodes and 4 antinodes. Nodes are the place where there is no displacement. These points are fixed. Antinodes are there where the maximum displacement takes place. And the antinodes and nodes, they undergo precision based on the rotation rate. We try to operate in n = 2 mode, where the 2 nodes and 2 antinodes are there, and that is the node in which we can have the gyro, working gyro. The n = 0 mode, n = 1 mode, they are n = 0 mode and n = 1 mode, they are not sensitive to the rotation rate. Then n = 3, n = 4, they are also sensitive to the rotation rate, but the measuring rotation becomes complicated. We can use n = 3, 4, but it is a complicated system. So n = 2 mode is generally used for HRG due to its simplicity in measurement. Now, as I earlier I have told, these nodes, they have undergone a precision based on the rotation rate, and the precision depends upon the scale factor. The scale factor of 0.3, basically K, which is the scale factor, depends upon the geometry. If it is a 0.2, if it is a cylinder, it is 0.7, or we have got tuning for gyroscope, another 0.25, like that. So the scale of the geometry of the vibrating structure. So this is the different applications of the HRG. Mainly it is being used for deep space applications like Saturn, the moon, to the Saturn and Jupiter. The precision systems, they are having the performance of 0.0006 degree per hour, that kind of systems. They are used in the system, and in fact, Hubble telescope also, they use the reference system for their altitude measurement and correction. This is. Then the advanced systems which are in the research field is the atomic interferometric gyroscope. It is similar to the gyroscope's magnetic effect. Magnetic effect uses an optical wave to measure the rotation rate. Here we use the matter wave to measure the rotation systems. Matter wave, which is basically cesium atoms. Their vibration, their wave nature is being used for rotation purpose. Now, advantage of this matter wave is that the matter wave is speed is so low, so that it becomes much more sensitive, because compared to the speed of light, the speed of matter wave is of the order of 10 to the power almost 8 order less. So the sensitivity by the principle itself is increasing 10 to the 8 times. So whatever a gyro of RLG of 28 centimeter or a fiber optic gyro of 500 meter, they can be made in a sheet scale of 2 centimeter by 2 centimeter dimensions. So the advantage of using the atomic interferometric gyroscope is very huge, but to maintain to reduce the speed or to maintain the matter wave, it is critical. So we use the lasers to cool it down. The matter should be cooled down so to the around 5 to 10 Kelvin, so that it can be properly controlled. So the cooling down is done by using the laser coolers. The energy of laser is used to bring down the energy of the atoms, thereby cooling. So magnetic straps are used for cooling purpose. So this quantum technology is used for measuring the to implement the atomic interferometric gyroscopes. In fact, using atoms, we can also measure acceleration also. This is advanced systems which are still under research stage, because these are emerging trends or advances. So a lot of researchers are going in different universities in the field of atomic interferometric gyroscopes. This is an ideal candidate for navigation in submarines, where we do not have a GPS for aiding for 48 hours or months together. If this is implemented, then the submarine can be underwater for months together. So I'll just skip this, then I'll come to the nuclear magnetic resonance gyroscopes. This principle was very old, also 1952, where the nuclear, the magnetic, the atomic spin is used. In there, the matter wave property of the matter was used in the atomic interferometric gyroscope, but NMR, we use the mechanical property of the spinning. The spin of the gyroscopes, the spin of the atomic nucleus. All atoms, they will have a property called as a spin property, where the spinning nuclear spin has got a magnetic moment, which is proportional to the inertia of the spinning body. That nuclear, when the spinning atom is placed in a magnetic field, then the axis of spinning undergoes a rotation based on the field, the magnetic field, not only on the magnetic field, but also based on the rotation of the sensor. So this is known as the Larmor frequency, where the resonant spinning is a frequency is based on the magnetic field. So that spinning frequency undergoes a rotation undergoes a change based on the rotation of the platform. So by measuring the spinning frequency, change in frequency, we can measure the rotation rate. The ideal candidates for them are the GN atoms as well as rubidium atoms. Both of them have been used, but GN atoms being higher atoms and more stable, they are now preferred for their stability purpose. So these principles are there, which is available in any literature, they can be studied. This is still not came. The NMR, it has to mature maybe another 2 to 3 years. It is expected to come to the market. Now, Coriolis gyroscopes, being used in HRG, they are also used in the MEMS gyros. You are using tuning form gyros or disk gyros also. So this X and Y axis, they undergo precision based on the rotation. The Coriolis principle tells that the Coriolis acceleration is proportional to the vector multiplication of velocity and the rotation. V cross omega is the Coriolis acceleration AC. So that Coriolis acceleration ensures that this vibrating mass undergoes a precision. So that is being used, and these are the different gyros, tuning for gyros, which are used available in the market. In fact, now the advantage of MEMS is that lower cost, smaller size, lower weight, and power is less, and robust design, mass producible. Only issue is that due to the stiction problem and stability problem, we don't get high accuracy in the MEMS gyros. That's why the present trend is to improve the MEMS process and the materials as well as the geometry to get better and better sensors with having less and less errors. So the trend of MEMS sensors are that we have got now 1 to 5 degree per hour in market readily available. Laboratory, we have got 0.05 degree per hour. Gyros are at different places being tested now. They are used for control purpose by default nowadays. But for navigation system to use the MEMS gyros in pure mode, it will take some more time. Maybe another 5 years down the line, we'll have a working MEMS gyro of 0.01 degree per hour. 0.5 degree per hour now, last year it has come to the market. But 0.01 degree per hour coming will take some time. To have a better performance, the DARPA program has given a go-ahead to the different companies in US to develop a 0.01 degree per hour gyroscopes using MEMS technology, either using glass blowing a glass HRG structure or a microscope diamond resonator. So they are using MEMS structure or disk structure also used for to get a MEMS gyro of 0.01 degree per hour. That is the directive given, and I think now the advances in MEMS technology will ensure that getting a 0.01 degree per hour will be possible. But to achieve this, a lot of advances in the material, geometry, as well as the electronics is needed. This is the trend of the gyros. Strategic missiles, till now they use the mechanical sensors, and nowadays they are using, they are planning to use HRG-based systems for submarines also. Then RLGs they are used widely. RLGs and FOGs in all kinds of missiles, having long-range missiles, where cost is not a matter. But when cost plays a role, like small missiles, then or attitude control purpose or only control purpose, mid-course guidance purpose, a low-grade gyros are used, which mainly consist of FOGs as well as MEMS gyros. Now coming to the accelerometers, we have got the pendulous accelerometer, where the pendulum will undergo a displacement due to inertia based on the acceleration coming. So like when we travel in a bus, we get a jerk in the forward or backward direction based on the opposite direction of the travel of the bus. So same principle is used here, and the detection is there are two capacitors, capaciting plates are there, which measure based on the deflection, the capacitance in pickup systems change. One side the capacitance increases, another side the capacitance decreases. By measuring the capacitance, we can measure the acceleration. This is used this is quite used in different applications now, highly reliable systems and highly accurate systems, because of the material being used as a pendulum. We use the quartz, which is a highly stable material and doesn't have much temperature sensitivity. Their properties don't change based on the temperature. So quartz is a material of selection for advanced accelerometers. Older accelerometers, they used to use a titanium-based pendulum. Then we have a vibrating beam accelerometer, where the vibration, this resonating vibration, will have the frequency of the vibration will undergo the acceleration. Undergo depending on acceleration. By measuring frequency, we measure the acceleration. This gives directly digital output. Then the fiber optics fiber principle is used also to measure the acceleration. Here, due to acceleration, the stresses get generated in the fiber medium, and due to the stress generated, the intensity pattern also changes. By measuring the intensity pattern, we can measure the acceleration. So the Bragg's wavelength changes based on the acceleration of the vehicle. So this also yet not came to market, but a lot of research is going on here to have an optical accelerometer, because the advantage is the mass producibility of this kind of accelerometers. Then we'll have I'll just keep this separate principle. We'll have the MEMS accelerometer also, same way. Then atomic interferometric accelerometers are also under the development stage. Atomic gravitymeter have been used. Here the atoms under the acceleration will go a phase difference, and that phase difference being measured. So the main advantage will be the same atoms can be used for both measurement of the gyros, measurement of rate as well as acceleration. So laser beam is used for cooling down the velocity of the atomic waves to 3 meters per second. This is ensured by bringing down the temperature of the atoms to 3 to 5 Kelvin only. That is minus 200 degrees centigrade, 270 degrees centigrade. That type of cooling has to be done of the atoms. So those things, if we can get these accelerometers, they will be ideal for the, again, as I told earlier, navigation for the submarine systems. So the main challenge is bringing it to the smaller dimensions and making the associated structures like magnetic traps, laser coolers, also very small in size. Those requirements are there, and main efforts are being put here to bring down the associated structures to smaller and smaller size. So accelerometer trends are also like that. Mechanical sensors, strategic applications still now use the pendulous accelerometers, PIGA, pendulous integrating gyro and accelerometers, or quartz accelerometers. Hello. Madam, another 2 minutes, madam. Okay, 2 minutes. Just completing. And then others applications, quartz resonators are used for tactical applications, low-grade applications. Then MEMS structures, MEMS accelerometers are used nowadays for low-grade applications like 300 microG to 500 microG class of accelerometers. They use the MEMS, but high-grade accelerometers in ships, still pendulous accelerometers are being used. Then coming to the magnetometers, we use magnetometer to aid the gyro output. Gyro errors are being reset time to and again using the magnetometer outputs. The magnetometers work based on different principles. What is being used is that resistance of the magnetometer, material changes based on the magnetic field. External magnetic field changes the resistivity of the material, and by measuring the resistance, we measure the angle or magnetic field of the Earth, and thereby decide the angle. Now, to measure this, also to compensate for vertical position errors, altimeters are used, barometric altimeters, so that we get the height measurement done using the barometers, and then it is being used for correcting the z-axis position errors. Then other sensors are the radar altimeters. Again, this is also used for measuring the position. But the thing is that others will come to know that there is a availability of another aircraft based on the output of the sensor. So detectability increases here for enemy if we use the altimeters. Then laser proximity fuse are also used for based on the same principle, time of travel measurement principle. Both RPF and LPF they are operate, and this also used nowadays widely for measuring the range. Advances to conclude this presentation, I will just speak about the biosensors, bio-navigation sensors, which are coming. A lot of work is going on here. The navigation through Earth's magnetic field. People are reading how the tortoise or birds, they travel long distance and again come back to their own position, our own home after traveling for 3 months, 4 months, that migrating birds, but still they come back to their original location. How would they do? So there are how their sense navigation activity takes place. Those studies are now also being conducted. Some they use the Earth's magnetic field, and some use the topography of different areas. Then they use the smell sensors. Different areas will have different smells of the earth smell, and they use the sun compass, star compass for biosensors, odor map, magnetic compass. They all have a lot of studies going on in all the fields to have a sensors using how the principles, how the different biological different animals, they use the navigation techniques. Those are being studied and being tried to realize the sensors based on this kind of technologies, navigation technologies. They will have a self-contained navigation technology, if we can realize, which will not be getting affected by external fields. The biosensors, as I was telling, these are the bioaccelerometers, biogyros using MEMS. Otolith is a dense mass which is used for this measurement purpose. So a lot of work is being carried out. A lot of papers are also now being presented, but these are the advanced emerging trends for the navigation sensors. So with that, I'll be concluding. This is biosensors being used for swarm intelligence. People study how ants, they travel together to reach a place. And a single sensor, when used, has got always the less productivity compared to complex set of sensors. So the trend is that we use many sensors and use the advantages of each sensor and nullify the negativities of each sensor to get a reliable navigation system using the intelligence process. So multi-sensor data fusion are the new trends using and to get a reliable navigation system. That's all they use. Biomimicry, that is the ultimate thing, how the navigation will be coming up in the long future. With that, I'll be concluding. Thank you all. This I'll be skipping all the systems. That's all.
Thank you very much, sir. You have enlightened the participants about the sensors in the field of navigation systems and highlighted various techniques and setups in the navigation systems, inspiring session for all the participants to develop a GL towards the area of navigation systems and their applications, sir. And your sessions related to bio-inspired navigation techniques are wonderful, sir. Thank you for accepting our invitation, sir. Thank you,
ma'am. Thank you for inviting me and giving this lecture. It was nice talking to you all. Thank you.
Sir, we request you to just wait for a minute. I request all participants to kindly enable your cams. We will take a small screenshot.
Venkat Reddy, sir.
Yes, madam. I made my
Sir,
camera.
please join, sir. Venkat Reddy, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We'll have one photograph, sir.
Yeah, sure, ma'am.
We request all the participants to kindly enable your cams.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Dear participants, next session will start within 5 minutes. Take a break of 5 minutes now.